ESXi1 is going down, then immediately the secondary on ESXi2 would become primary, and immediately there is no redundancy for this primary machine. A secondary machine is created on ESXi3, and this would be working as secondary. Alright, now let us say if ESXi2 is also down, then VM1 primary is going down, and this secondary would become primary. Okay, and immediately there is no redundancy for this primary machine. So another machine, VM1, exactly identical virtual machine VM1 would be created on ESXi4, and this would be acting as secondary to this. Okay, and now if ESXi3 is going down, then what will happen is that the secondary will become primary machine, and this secondary which became primary would continue to run as primary, and there is no another host available, so there wouldn't be any redundancy for this primary machine till the time a new host is added to it. Okay, so this is how your fault tolerance functions, guys. Here there's a concept of primary and secondary machine. Okay, and this is how fault tolerance functions. All right, guys, clear with the concept of fault tolerance? I'll ask you a question now. In this scenario, suppose my primary machine was on ESXi1 and secondary on ESXi2. ESXi went down, then secondary became primary on ESXi2. ESXi2 went down, then secondary became primary on ESXi3. ESXi3 went down, then secondary became primary on ESXi4. Now, after half an hour, let us say all these three hosts, ESXi 1, 2, and 3, are back up and running. Then what happens, guys? Then what happens? Could you repeat? So primary would be there if all the three are coming up. ESXi 1, 2, and 3 are coming back up and running. So what about the machines which were running on that? Okay, fine. Okay, now let me explain the logic here. Guys, place on mute. I think there is some echo. Fine. All right, guys. Let me explain you the scenario here. Now primary VM1 on ESXi4, all the three hosts went down. Then immediately all the three hosts will come up. For this primary, there is no secondary, so there would be secondary created on any of these three hosts selected randomly, and there would only be one secondary machine now. So what happened to the other virtual machines which were running on ESXi 1, 2, and 3 as primaries? Guys, here, when I say that a new virtual machine is created, an exactly identical virtual machine is created on some other ESXi host, which is called a secondary machine, it is nothing but the virtual machine's process, guys. Okay? So what happens when the ESXi host goes down? That process gets killed, and that process will never come back up and running. Okay? There is a concept of only one primary and secondary. So the primary is running here, it requires redundancy. So whenever ESXi 1, 2, and 3 is back up and running, so a secondary would be created on any of these three hosts. That means a new process gets created. Secondary process gets created, and that is only a process. Okay. And here, the other two primary virtual machines which went down, or all the three virtual machines which went down, are only the processes. Those processes got killed, and they will never come up again. Why? Because it was only a process of the virtual machine. So that is the concept, guys. So those machines, those primary machines will never be back up and running because they were only the processes which got killed. Fine. So this is how fault tolerance functions, and this is the architecture and the mechanism behind fault tolerance. Okay. Now let me give you or inform you certain prerequisites and limitations of fault tolerance. Better you make a note of it. I'm listing it out here. The first, guys, fault tolerance, you require CPUs, that means the physical CPUs, which support fault tolerance. So not all CPUs support fault tolerance. So there are certain CPUs which support fault tolerance, and you can find out which are the CPUs which support fault tolerance on the VMware website, what we call it as hardware compatibility guide. So first you require the CPUs which support fault tolerance. Second, your host should be a part of HA cluster. Third, you need to configure a VM kernel port for fault tolerance. Port for fault tolerance. Okay. And then the fourth one, your virtual machine should be on shared storage. Fifth, you can call it as a prerequisite or a limitation. Virtual machine should have only a single virtual CPU. Virtual machine with only single virtual CPU is supported with fault tolerance. What is the meaning of it is that your virtual machine should be configured with a single core. That's it. Fault tolerance doesn't support virtual machines with multiple cores. You can call it as a limitation. Okay. And the sixth one, virtual machines, virtual hard disk. Okay. Virtual machines, virtual hard disk should be thick, eager, 0. So these are the six prerequisites or the limitations of fault tolerance. First, the CPU should support fault tolerance. Second, the host should be a part of HA cluster. Third, VM kernel port configured for fault tolerance on all the hosts. Virtual machine should be on shared storage. Virtual machine should be configured with a single virtual CPU. Virtual machines, virtual hard disk should be configured with thick, eager, 0. So these are the prerequisites or limitations of fault tolerance. Okay, fine. And few more things, that fault tolerance can also be used along with DRS cluster, and the maximums. You can have 4 virtual machines protected with fault tolerance feature on your host. So these 4 virtual machines include the primary and secondary. Why? Because whenever you enable fault tolerance on a virtual machine, a secondary machine is created on some other ESXi host. So on a host, at max you can have 4 virtual machines. These 4 virtual machines protected with fault tolerance. So this includes the primary and the secondary machine as well. And one more thing, if you are using fault tolerance, then on the host, you need to disable BIOS-based power management. You need to go into the BIOS and better to disable the BIOS-based power management on the host. So this is all about your fault tolerance. Any questions, queries on fault tolerance before I start the practicals, guys? Any questions, guys, on fault tolerance?
Since we may require a dual core processor, then what will be the condition?
For the virtual machine you are talking about?
Yeah,
Yeah.
suppose some applications
Yes.
are running on particular virtual machine, it may
Yes.
require a multi-core processor.
Yes. Yes, guys. If that's the
Then,
case, then unfortunately I cannot use the fault tolerance feature. Okay. Fine. It is a limitation of fault tolerance that it supports only the virtual machines with only a single virtual CPU. Guys, in virtual infrastructure, almost
hello?
Hello.
Just a moment. I'll be back. Just a moment. Okay. Now, unfortunately, fault tolerance support only one virtual CPU. It's a single virtual CPU, and guys, 95% of the workloads will run fine with a single virtual CPU. But however, if you have a certain applications which require dual core or more than one CPU to your application, then unfortunately, fault tolerance cannot be enabled on it. It is a limitation. However, VMware is working on it, and most probably they'll come up with this support for fault tolerance for multiple virtual CPUs. Maybe in the next release, maybe in the vSphere 6. Fine. Uh, we came to know that they were successful in implementing fault tolerance on more than one virtual CPU. We are expecting this in 5. Unfortunately, they were not able to release it in 5. Even in 5.1, they haven't released it. So even 5.5, they haven't released that particular feature. Most probably, there are some features which they have to come out of it. Maybe they are working on it, and most probably we think that by 6, when they release vSphere 6, they'll come up with full support for fault tolerance. Maybe they'll even support up to 64 virtual CPUs, maybe. So we don't know. We are waiting for that feature. Till that time, we can't do anything. Why? Because it is the limitation of fault tolerance that it supports only the virtual machine with a single virtual CPU. Right? Any other questions apart from that?
Thank you, Moses.
You're welcome. Fine, guys. Now let us see the practical.
Hello.
Just a moment, guys. So guys, I'm not speaking. Okay, I'm just waiting for my virtual machines to power on. Okay, that's it. Okay, guys, I was able to connect to my vCenter server, which is running on my workstation. Okay, so let me show you the practicals. Yeah, first I'll create a new data center. I'm going to Spot. I'll add a host to it. Okay, now let me show you how to create a cluster here. Guys, are you able to hear my voice?
Yeah.
Yep. Now let us see how to create a cluster. The guys cluster is configured, managed, and monitored at vCenter level, and cluster can be created on a data center. Okay. So right click on a data center, and you find the option which says new cluster. And here you need to give a name to the cluster. Let me give the name production. And the cluster features, as I told you, vSphere clustering service has two features. The first one is turn on vSphere HA. If you check on this, then this becomes HA cluster. If you turn on vSphere DRS, then this becomes DRS cluster. If you turn on both, then this cluster will have both the features HA and DRS. So let me first show you how to configure HA. Check this box, click on next, and here, guys, what HA cluster does, the first thing it does is it provides high availability against host failures, and that is done by enabling host monitoring. This is enabled by default. If you uncheck it, then it will not be able to monitor the host, and it will not respond to the host failures. So by default, this should be checked, and we should not change it. Then comes admission control. Yesterday we have discussed what is admission control. Guys, it refers to the amount of resources that can be used to restart virtual machines in the event of failovers. And here you can enable the admission control policy or disable it. However, if you enable admission control policy, then we can reserve certain amount of resources which can be used to restart the virtual machines in the event of host failures, right? And and what will happen is that to enable this policy, uh, let us say there are on a host there are 10 virtual machines which were running, and that host went down. All these 10 virtual machines will also go down, but they'll be restarted on some other ESXi host within 3 minutes. Now, suppose there are not enough resources available to restart these 10 virtual machines, then what is going to happen? Then only those virtual machines will be restarted for whom resources were available. The other virtual machines where the resources are not available, they'll not be restarted until those resources are available. So by default, we are enabling the policy, which is admission control policy enable. However, if you disable this policy, then we are not reserving any capacity as a failover capacity here. However, when you disable this policy, then what will happen is that virtual machines which go down because of host failures will try to come up on some other ESXi host forcibly, and what will happen is that maybe the existing virtual machines uh, will get affected. So the best method is to enable the policy, and when you enable the policy here beneath that, you find two types of policies. The first one, host failure, the cluster will tolerate. Now here, guys, yesterday I informed you that cluster means group. Minimum 2 hosts are required for a cluster, and maximum is 32. So here in this policy, we can set the number of hosts the clusters can tolerate. The cluster can tolerate. Guys, if I set, suppose in my cluster there are 10 hosts, and if I set a policy where that the cluster will tolerate 4 host failures, then according